Hi guys, it's Kelly Latevola here, and I'm back again with another video for Neat and Tangled. Today we are going to be using the Butterfly Beauties and the matching die, and then this other stamp set called Geometric. You know I love mixing geometric shapes with flowers and softer images. So these butterflies are beautiful. They're drawn to look jeweled. So I am going to actually do some no-line coloring with colored pencils. I know, I'll wait until you get yourselves back sorted in your seats, since surely you fell on the ground when you heard that I was going to be doing no line coloring with colored pencils. It makes sense. I totally get it. Here I stamped in the ink on 3 fade out ink. It is a little bit darker than it would be in real life because my stamp was dirty and I didn't realize it. It's okay. It's not going to affect the overall coloring. I have my colored pencils here, and then also my sharpener, which you won't see me use on screen, but I am periodically going back in and sharpening my colored pencils just so I can get into all the little, as Kathy Rakusin likes to say, nooks and crannies. I kind of approach my colored pencils the same way that I approach my Copics, and that is layering is super important. Layering is much more important with colored pencils than it is with Copics, because you can get a seamless one coat cover with Copics. You really can't with colored pencils. You have to build up that color. And the way that you get a super good blend is by filling up the fibers of the paper with the pigment from the colored pencils. So I fill the whole thing in with my lightest color, and then I start adding shading where I want that to go, and then continually building up on top of that. I do. Now Eric, when he watches this, is going to laugh because he's going to be like, you said doo-doo. I do use the same technique when I'm doing my Copics as well as my colored pencils, which is I start with my lightest color, work out to my darkest, from my darkest back into my lightest. Sometimes I do go over it a few times with my lightest color at the end there, just to make sure everything's filled in and really nicely blended. For this particular, I'm sure you saw when we started, there were 2 cards. One of them I'm going to color on screen, and one of them is already colored. I actually did it during the 30-day coloring challenge because I knew that I wanted this to be my video for Neat and Tangled, so I was trying to get the hang of it because I hadn't really done this in a super long time, and no line coloring is very overwhelming for me. So here's a couple of tips that I picked up along the way. Now, these are not hard and fast rules. They are just things that worked for me. And as you know, I'm a big proponent of you do what works for you. So I found that until I got comfortable, working in smaller areas was much more comfortable for me. So doing the little things like these circles, I did not go all the way out to the darkest color for these circles. I just went in to get enough shading that you would be able to tell that it was the same shading, like general shading. But then the other thing that I noticed was that I did much better in working in areas that weren't directly next to each other. So when I'm doing the wings, I'm skipping a line in between each, and this helps to still keep the shape of the butterfly wing, but so that it doesn't get so mushy right off the bat, and I don't really know where my lines are. So by establishing these first, then I can go back in and fill in the other ones, and it's much more comfortable for me. I was a huge, when I first started trying to color with colored pencils, one of my biggest problems was I was putting too much pressure down on the paper. One of the reasons that I was putting too much pressure down on the paper is because I was trying to fill it in too quickly. Colored pencils are a time-consuming process, and the more you do it, the faster you get at it. Just like with my Copics, I'm probably much faster than most people just because I've done the process so many times. But for colored pencils, I would just wanted it to be done. I wanted to go over it twice and be done with it. And that isn't always feasible, depending upon especially how large of an area you have. So one of the ways that I could ease up on that pressure and also stop my hand from hurting so much when I was coloring was to back up my grip on the pencil. So instead of like how you see me here, it's just from practicing, and I've gotten a little bit more comfortable, where I'm about maybe a ½ inch from the point of the tip. If you back your hand up to giving yourself maybe 3/4 of an inch to an inch from where the tip of your finger is to the tip of the pencil, you cannot hold it as tightly. You just can't. You can't apply as much pressure, so it forces you to have a lighter hand until you can get used to how much pressure you should be putting down. I didn't realize it until I took some classes, and actually the one that I took was from Kit and Clowder, which I would totally recommend. They are amazing classes. You do have to pay for them, but it's totally worth it. But anyway, is in that class is where she taught me that my hands should not be hurting when I'm coloring with colored pencils, and that was one of the big reasons why I didn't want to color with colored pencils, is because I would walk away and my hand would be cramping, like I had just driven home from a snowstorm. I live in Ohio, so it's like that's norm. And it should not be that way. The other thing is doing the multiple layers, building up the color, not rushing the process. So there's just like a handful of kind of tips that I have picked up along the way on my journey. I still prefer Copics. I prefer the look of Copics to colored pencils, but I can say that there is something about colored pencils, the way that they blend, how smooth that they are, that there's something just really endearing about them. And sometimes when you're coloring a project, the markers just aren't going to get that look. So yeah, that's that. You'll see the other butterfly that I colored, I did not do no line coloring, just to be clear there. I did a black outline. So I stamped it just like you would any other outline stamp. And then I colored it with colored pencil. That's actually the one I prefer, but I love a bold black outline. Not everybody does, and they're two completely different looks. Same butterfly, two totally different looks. And this does look much cooler, I think, with the no lines. It looks much more like a natural butterfly, less cartoonish, with the black outline. But to each your own. Every look is different, and I like exploring and trying different things to see how those will work for me, and then sharing them with you guys to see if maybe those will work for you. So yeah, that's that. You might have noticed that I've sped up the process here, just because it is very long. Even though I've sped up the process, it's still a 20-some minute video. So this is something that, like, if I'm doing it and I'm not doing it on camera or for a video, I like to sit in front of the TV while Eric and I are watching a show or watching TV, or something like that, because I can't sit still. Honestly, it's very hard for me to just sit and watch a movie and just sit and be still. So this is a way for me to kind of do something that's not completely distracting away from whatever I'm watching, and still get those things done. So speaking of doing things, it's been crazy around here. So a little scary. Last Tuesday, I started with a sore throat. And so obviously, with everything going on with the coronavirus and my anxiety already sky high, like no joke. Before it was just like travel anxiety and driving on the road, and now it's like, oh my gosh, worry anxiety. And so been doing a lot of praying and trying to give it to God, because I realize there's nothing that I can do about it. It's the worry will not change anything. I understand that on a rational level. I just can't turn my brain off. But anyway, so I had a sore throat. And so I called my family physician, and I was like, hey, I don't have a fever. I don't have any other symptoms, but I do have a sore throat. What do you think? And she was like, well, we're still seeing regular patients. You're more than welcome to come in. And I was like, but do you think I need to? Because honestly, I don't really want to. I just want to stay in my house, which I can't do because we're both still working. But anywho, so I figured out, like, I doped out after a couple of days that because there's no masks to be had, because they are going to the heroes on the front lines of this coronavirus pandemic, I was sanding without a mask. And I didn't really, because I've never done furniture finishing. I mean, I guess I on the outskirts, I knew like I should be wearing a mask, but it didn't even occur to me that that could be what the cause of my sore throat was. So we've kind of slowed down on the dining room refinishing. I don't really have anything to report on that front. I was talking to my mom about it, and she was like, your dad's got a slew of stuff in the garage. I think that there might be some masks in there, along with some like steel wool and some other things. So my dad did a drive by. Let me think, 2 or 3 days ago. Nathan and I stood behind the glass front door and waved to him as he dropped the box off on my front porch, which was very nice of him. But I have not gone back down and sanded. Eric's actually doing that right now while I do my voiceover. So I'm hoping now with a mask I'll be able to get back at it, and our dining room will be less of a disaster area because, you know, we're 3 chairs in, 2 chairs left, and a table. So we're kind of right smack dab in the middle of it. I have to tell you that so been Skyping, like obviously I talked to my, you know, my mom and dad on the phone, or you know, like most people do, but we've been doing the Skyping so that she can see Peanut. And then what day was it? It was someday last week. She made breakfast sausage, which I totally love. My mom's sausage is my favorite. And she made brownies, and so I went down there to pick them up from her porch and waved at her through the door. And it's such a little thing. I know that. Like, see, I'm starting to get a little emotional. I apologize. It's such a little thing, but like seeing my mom and dad through this like glass door and not being able to, you know, hug them or give them a kiss goodbye, or, you know, what I would normally do, just makes me so incredibly sad. It just, you know, I'm grown, I know that, but I don't think there's any point where you don't need your parents, you know, at least not my family. So I just, I miss them. I miss my family. We are a super close family. You know that if you listen to my channel, I spend a lot of time together. We do a lot of, you know, family game nights and getting together for dinner and, you know, all of those things. And I miss them. I miss being able to spend time with them. Now, there's some people I know who were, with the whole pandemic, they're, you know, cheating, like, hey, it's just a coffee date, or it's just one play date, or, you know, I'm not doing that. I can't risk putting my parents, you know, in that position because they're, you know, in the high risk category. So I won't do that, but I will be very, very glad when this is over and I can hug them again. I will be very glad, and I know I'm not the only one. So Nathan and I, when I put him to bed at night, we always go through, you know, the best part of the day and the worst part of the day, and he likes to do a sliding scale, so 1 to 5, what kind of day you're having. And, you know, then we do what we're most grateful for, which is basically the equivalent of our prayers. So talking about what we're most grateful for and, you know, thanking God for those things. And he's 6, so sometimes it's hard for him to think kind of outside of his own little world. You know, he's thankful for animals and bunnies and, you know, the dogs and, you know, and people, mommy and daddy and Nana and Papa and all that, you know. But so we have been adding, certainly, first responders, and because of, you know, me working in the police department, first responders has always had a very specific definition for me. But now with this whole thing changing, you know, right now our first responders are not just police, fire, EMS, you know, they're also doctors and nurses. They are grocery store workers. They are truckers. They are people working in, you know, the restaurant industry who are still doing, you know, carry out. And Ohio right now has a shelter in place order. So we've, you know, upgraded from the social distancing to shelter in place, and I'm all for it. I'm not one of I know some people are upset that they won't be able to go out for X amount of months, and I'm like, hey, if it's going to save some people's lives, let's do it. And it's not necessarily ideal, but I don't think that it's worth risking overloading our healthcare system either. And certainly not an MD. But anyway, if you are one of those people who is doing those things, or if you are a person like me who is, well, I'm still having to go to work, but if you're doing your best to stay at home and only going, like, sending one family member to the grocery store, and not making any unnecessary stops, and just thank you for doing your part in the middle of something that is never been seen before in our lifetime. It's just crazy, totally crazy right now. So anyway, on a lighter note, I made a pillowcase. Let's talk about, I want you to leave, here's what I want you to leave me in the comments. This is what I want you to leave me. One positive that has come out of this quarantine, shelter in place, social distancing. For me so far, I have now become a furniture restorer, refinisher. I've learned that skill. And I don't want to say seamstress. That's what I said jokingly to my mother earlier, but I'm not making anything. Outfits. I made a pillowcase, y'all. Okay, I had a pillowcase that Emma had chewed because, she's the worst, terrible, most awful. And for those of you who have asked, she's not gone to training, no, and she won't go until after this is over. But anyway, so I had a pillow that she chewed, and it was like a woven fabric. And like, I don't mean like a woven fabric, like a drop cloth type fabric. I mean like actual cords that were woven into each other. And I wanted to recover it because she had chewed it. So before all of this started, I had picked up some fabric, and the front is like a white, with like like a crocheted, almost like damask pattern. And then the back, I just picked up some like creamish tan color. And I was going to do a no-sew pillow because I don't really like to sew. Well, I shouldn't say I don't like to sew. I like to cross stitch, but sewing is not my forte. And I don't have a sewing machine. Like, that's just a reality of it. Back to the card. Okay, so all the coloring is pretty much done at this point. I'm going to add a little bit of shading to the circle that's around like the jewel of the body. And then I'm going to use a black colored pencil to outline the antennas so that they stand out. And then I'm going to color the rest of it off camera because it's the same exact thing. It's just on the other side. And then the one that you'll see for the other card is actually the colors are inverted. So instead of being the majority of it pink, the majority of it is blue, and the highlights are pink. But I colored them the same way. Again, the only difference being one is stamped in black and one of them is no line coloring. So here, this beautiful, beautiful thing, is like beading, like jewels that like come down from, I love it. I think it is so pretty. And I even picked the music for this video. Like, I typed in gypsy because that's what it made me think of. I just think it's so stunning. It's like the butterfly is a chandelier. I love it. I totally love it. Anyway, but I was trying to get my placement right. And then I'm going to white heat emboss this. I'm also going to white heat emboss the double triangle that is included in the geometric set onto my other background and both of the sentiments. But I have something to say about the one of them, so we'll come back to that. Anywho, back to the pillow. So my game plan was to do a no-sew pillow. So I watched a bunch of YouTube tutorials, and I was using like the heat bonder, stitch witchery, whatever you want to talk about, the iron-on one. So you iron it with the paper on for 2 seconds. Then you peel the paper off. Then you fold your paper or your fabric back over, and then you hold it for like an 8 count over the whole thing, and it bonds. And then you don't have to sew. And I've used it multiple times. I've never used this particular brand before, but I've used the other kinds of it. In fact, my gas station pants, which if you watched me on Periscope, you know what those are, which I'm wearing right now, no shame. these have held up for 6 years, being washed multiple times and worn and everything else. And they have it in the seam of it covering up a gigantic hole. And I still wear them because, again, no shame in my game. But anyway, so I was doing it, and it really was not holding very well. In some of the areas it was holding, but in some of the areas it was not. So I ended up just having to sew it. I had to sew the no-sew pillow. Now, at least everything was kind of laid out already, and it was kind of holding them together, so I didn't have to do like pins and all that jazz. But so I did sew it, and then I did just like a quick, simple, like single back stitch, because it's just a throw pillow, y'all. But I did do like cross stitches on the corners just to keep him from, just like added layer of protection. So for this card background, I did the two triangles together, and then I just flipped it. So I stamped it once in Versamark, and then flipped it so that I would have one on top and one on bottom. My butterfly is going to go in the middle, so I'm not really worried about filling that space in. And then you'll see when I did the sentiment, I did it, you can only read it one way, and I'm aware of that. But symmetry is important, especially when you're doing something like this, where it's such a simple background and everything will be symmetrical. I couldn't have just one in one spot and not in the other. So that is why I opted to stamp the sentiment twice, even though I know only one is really legible. Okay. So anyway, I ended up hand sewing this pillowcase. And it actually wasn't bad because it wasn't really difficult. I just went around my little square, and it was an envelope style pillowcase. So like I flipped it back inside out, poked my little corners, shoved my pillow in there, everything fit. It was super full, and I was very excited. And then I turned it around and realized that my envelope, like where the two pieces come together, had probably about, I don't know, 1/4 of an inch gap. Eric smushed it down for me and like pulled the fabric so that it mostly stays closed, but if you bump it right, it pops back open. So I'm currently toying with the idea of putting a button, like a loop button on there as like a decoration that will help keep it closed. But several people pointed out on Instagram when I shared it, including my very good friend Mary Dawn, who sews all the time. And she was like, it's going to be facing the back of the sofa and nobody's going to see it, so why do you care? And I was like, that's a good point. But I don't know. I think when you're doing something yourself by hand, and like you're going to tell people you made it by hand, you want it to look a certain way. Not perfect. I don't need perfection. But like I also don't want it to be wildly outside the norm of like, my envelope doesn't close. But we'll see what happens from there. I have another however many weeks we're going to be in this to figure out whether or not I'm going to add that button, right? Right. So now that the backgrounds are done, I am adding some foam tape to each one of these butterflies so that they will be popped up. This is the butterfly that is the no line coloring, the one that we did here together. I'm just going to line that up with the little gems. And tell me that doesn't look. I just love the way it looks. I think it's so super pretty. And in that set, there's also an additional like gems, so you could make them longer, like add on to the design, which I love. So then on this one, doing the same thing, popping it up on foam, and it has the two, triangle designs. I don't know which one I like more. As far as the backgrounds, I don't even know that I could pick. But anyway, so here I'm just going to add some glitter just to the accents portion. Beware of your glitter because colored pencils have wax in them. This is going to sit on the surface and it's going to take a little while to dry. Just be aware of that so you're not moving your cards around right away or smearing your glitter where you don't want it to go. As if there's anywhere you don't want glitter to go, honestly. It should go on all the things. But then that's really it. Those are both of the cards. So I hope that you learned a little something. I'll be looking forward to see what your positives are about our social distancing, shelter in place situation. And that's it. So thank you guys so much for joining me. I will catch you on the next video. Bye.